Don't ever stop.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. Yesterday we went through and looked at players who are heading into their third year in the NBA, and that's a time when often players take big steps forward. They increase their playmaking, they increase their efficiency, they increase their minutes, they increase their usage, all those things which are so tasty for us in fantasy. The other second most common time for players to do that are guys heading into their fourth season. So we're going to look at the players who are heading into their fourth season in the NBA in today's show. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. We will start by looking at some real interesting players in this bunch of players who are heading into their fourth year in the NBA. The first one we'll start with actually is a player who has changed teams. That's Dario Saric, now of the Phoenix Suns. Now, Saric has been, in my opinion, a little bit of an overrated fantasy player. 135th in his rookie season in 26 minutes, 74th the next season in Philadelphia, and that was just in 30 minutes a game. So that was obviously a relatively impressive year, but then a real dip last season. Played 5 fewer minutes and ended the season as the 180th best player. But heading to Phoenix is a little bit of a different situation. You won't have the nonsense of whatever Tom Thibodeau was doing and playing Taj Gibson over him. He is going to come in as the starting power forward on the Phoenix Suns. And those 25 minutes, they should be able to jump back up at least close to that 30-minute mark. The Suns are a team who don't really have another power forward on this roster. Yes, they can go with Kelly Oubre, Mccall Bridges combinations there, but they aren't. They had TJ Warren playing that position last season. He's not there anymore. So Josh Jackson will also play at the position sometimes. He's not there anymore. So this position has really opened up for Saric. But what does he need to do to get back to being that guy that he was in Philadelphia, where he averaged 14.5, 6.5 with 2.5 assists? And those numbers aren't overwhelmingly good. Part of the reason was the good shooting. Now that hasn't dipped. Really strong free throws the last 2 years, 86 and 88, 39 from 3 2 years ago, 36 last season. It's about getting that volume back up. 18% usage last season. I think he exceeds 20% usage in Phoenix this year. Yes, even though Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton are there, Mccall Bridges is a low usage guy, Ravishing Rick Rubio is a low usage guy. I can see Saric, while I don't think he's got a very high upside, I can see him pushing up and getting back relatively close to that 15-7 that he averaged a couple of seasons ago. The defensive stats are never going to be there, but one thing I think we can see from him is back to an increase in the passing. 2.6 assists in his best season in Philadelphia, only 1.6 last year. Again, on this Phoenix team, Booker and Rubio will handle the ball, but in that front court, Bridges, Ayton, these guys aren't passers. I think we'll see a little bit more from Saric there, so I do expect him to take a decent step forward this season. The next guy we take a look at now is a player who may be out of the collective consciousness of a lot of guys because he didn't play last season, and that's Dejounte Murray of the San Antonio Spurs. Murray was installed as a starter halfway through his second season in the NBA. That year he did finish the 176th overall in fantasy, but it was just in 22 minutes per game. Obviously, last year he was going to be set for 30 minutes a night, but then tore his ACL. It is a really interesting situation here in San Antonio. I think there's a legitimate chance that Derrick White is a better player currently than Dejounte Murray and will be a better player moving forward. And I think that he's going to be a better fantasy guy. But how to fit those two guys in, along with Bryn Forbes, along with Patty Mills, along with Lonnie Walker as well in that mix there, where are all these guys going to fit in? And that's not even including Marco Bellinelli. Where are all these guys going to fit in and get their minutes? So I think that we'll see a relatively limited Dejounte this season. Now, whether you draft him or Derrick White, I think they're both got to be relatively late picks. Murray, of course, can't shoot at all. In his career, he's hit 18 threes through 120 games. So not a high volume guy there, and not a good assist player either, really. Only he averaged in that second season 4.8 assists per 36 minutes. Now, even if that was just if you average 4.8 assists as a starting point guard in 30 minutes a night, you'd say that's really low. But per 36, that's extraordinarily low. So what he does provide is a really high steal rate. He can block shots at a decent level as well, but he is an excellent rebounder, one of the best guard rebounders in the NBA. A low usage player, just 20% usage in that season where he was the starter in San Antonio. I think we hear all this talk. He's been working on his offense. The shooting's going to come. It's going to have to come for him to be able to play a decent chunk of minutes. Otherwise, that lineup is going to be really crunched. Now, I could see them going with a Murray and White combination, but that would rely upon them starting LaMarcus Aldridge at center, I believe, and putting DeRozan at the 3 and Gay at the 4. I don't think you'd want to see Murray, White, DeRozan, Aldridge, and Pirtle. Like, literally not one person there who can shoot threes. White's the best shooter. He's like a 34% three-point shooter. So I think while we have to have, I guess, some hope with Murray here, the situation, the recovery from the ACL, all those things are maybe, and he's an excellent defender. We know how good of a defender he is, but that doesn't always translate into great fantasy stuff. So I think we should be just a little bit... Let's keep our expectations a little bit in check for Deshante coming back, not only because of the injury, but because of his own limitations and the way that the team around him is currently structured. If you play fantasy football, make sure you're listening to Locked On Fantasy Football with Vinny Iyer. He gives you the edge with 20 years of fantasy football experience. If you listen to the same stuff as everyone else, you're not going to have any differentiation in your team. So go check out Vinny. Get the edge from Locked On Fantasy Football on your local favorite podcast provider. All right, the next guy is someone that everyone's going to want to hear about, and that is Pascal Siakam, who took such a huge leap forward. I actually went back and listened to a bit of my third-year player podcast from last season, and the talk I had about Siakam was interesting. I said, I expect this guy to take a big leap forward, and I said, maybe he pushes from inside the top 200, and maybe he can be, I think, a 14-team league guy, and he might be able to push higher than that. But what he did last season was take that three-point shooting, and we forget, he was a 22% three-point shooter as a second-year guy, got all the way to 37%. Usage jumped 4 percentage points as well. One thing that did happen is his defensive numbers dropped a little bit there, but being able to deal with that increase in usage, but do it also with a massive increase in efficiency is hard to do. 55 true shooting up to 63 true shooting. It's a huge jump from Siakam, but now he has to take the mantle as the number one guy in Toronto. Yes, Kyle Lowry is still there. Marc Gasol is also still there, and both of those guys can be 1A, 1B type of players. How Siakam fares in this new role is going to be really, really curious. But what we did see is he can go out there and he can score. He can do it efficiently, but having that extra attention, I think there's a real risk that Siakam gets overdrafted heading into this season because people just go, well, naturally, he took this big step forward. Now Kawhi's gone. He will be a top 20 guy. And I'm not so sure that's going to be the case. He did see a big increase in his assist numbers, which was really, really strong to be able to do that, especially in the second half of the season. He hit threes at a bigger volume, and he was able to get that efficiency up, but still only took 2.7 threes per game. So while he shot it well, it's not huge amounts there. So there is still a lot of work to go from Siakam. Over his last 24 games, he averaged 20, 6.5, and 4, but under a steal and under a block. So his value really coming in the efficiency categories, which makes him more likely to be a category guy versus a points league guy, and again, more favored probably in rotisserie leagues versus head-to-head leagues, because he doesn't have this really one standout category, although the points could become a standout category for Siakam. So he will, I think, take a step forward, but it's far from a fait accompli that Siakam comes in and just blows everyone away again. There might be some struggles as he adjusts to this new role. Budrick Hield, a fourth-year guy who I had ranked pretty high last season. He ended up exceeding my rankings, ended up as the 49th ranked player for the season, and he did that by just really getting the playing time that he should have been getting all along. He went from 25 minutes a game to 32 minutes a game. So what we have to look at now, getting from third to fourth season, where does that get better? What sort of minute load increase can he have? And I think that's pretty tough. With Harrison Barnes and Trevor Ariza coming in to play the 3 in Sacramento, that means less minutes, fewer minutes actually, would be more correct English, for Bogdan Bogdanovic to play at the 3, meaning he's going to have to play more at the 2, which means Bud's 32 minutes a game. How much further are they going to want to push that? And that means limiting Bogdan, who is really, really a good player, obviously. 20 points a game for Hield last season. The 3-point shooting, nobody should have any concern there. But one thing that's going to be key, the improvement from Hield has got to be in steals. His first 3 seasons in the NBA, 0.7 steals per 36, pretty bad. His second year, 1.5 per 36, really good. Last season, 0.8. bad. But in a very similar vein to John Collins, it was skewed by a real lack of steals to begin the season, and at the end of the year, they started coming in much larger rates, and over the final 26 games of the season, he was back to 1.3 steals per 36. So, if Hield can come in and get you that 1.2, 1.3 steals a game, shoot efficiently, score those 20 points per game, there's a chance that he can jump an extra 2 rounds there, but getting from this area as the 49th best player and pushing yourself into the next level, that can be a lot harder than going from 100 to 50. Going from 50 to 30 can be a lot tougher, and we'll see how that goes for Bud Hield. Jamal Murray heads into his 4th season. I think we almost know what Murray is at the moment, a 66th ranked player last season, which was a marginal step back from the year before, despite playing an extra minute per game. And the reason that he dropped off was a drop in efficiency. 58 true shooting down to 54. His excellent 91 free throws went down to 85. And while that's still good, it's almost, in terms of Z-score value, it's almost half that value by losing that amount there. That's a concern. The 2-point shooting went from 50 down to 48. That's a bit of a concern as well. 3-pointers from 38 to 37. So all of his percentages dropped right across the board, and that's what led those numbers to fall off. Now, on the positive side, the assist rate did jump up, but when we look at what Jamal Murray did, 18, 4, and 5, with a steal a game, where does he get better? It has to be in that efficiency. He played 33 a night. I don't think that's going to change, so he's got to come in here, and if he gets that efficiency back up, maybe he becomes a 20-point per game scorer with that elite efficiency, and that maybe jumps him 15, 20 spots. So I'm not sure we're looking at a 4th-year breakout for Murray, but an improvement is absolutely a possibility for him. Malcolm Brogdon heads into a new role now with Indiana after being that shooting guard in Milwaukee the last couple of years. 77th ranked player last season in 29 minutes. I feel really confident he's going to play more than 29 minutes a game this season. The 51, 93, and 43% shooting splits, that might be tough to continue, but been always an excellent free throw shooter. And the worst season he's had in terms of shooting threes has been 39%. So he will be fine in getting those numbers. His steal rate has dropped off, but one thing I think we will see with him, along with the increase in minutes, maybe an increase in usage, but an increase in assist rate. In his first NBA season, he averaged 5.8 assists per 36, where he played primarily as a point guard. The next 2 years, 3.8 and 4 assists per 36 as a shooting guard. He goes now to be the point guard, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Brogdon jump pretty high up here, maintain that efficiency, play an extra 4 minutes a night, become like an 18, 4, and 5.5 sort of a player, which pushes him very comfortably inside the top 50. So Brogdon had the efficiency under control last season. Now it's a new role, it's a more fantasy-friendly role, and that should see him take that step up that really is going to make us pretty interested in what he's able to do this season. Another guy who's got a real opportunity at more minutes is Monta Sabonis, who played under 25 minutes a game last year and was still the 83rd ranked player in fantasy. Now, he is likely to be the starting power forward alongside Miles Turner. He averaged 14 and 9 on absolutely elite scoring, 59% from the field, 72 from the line. He did shoot 53% on his threes. Of course, that was on, let's see how many actual attempts, 17 attempts. So it's really hard to justify you're thinking that's going to continue long term. So the question here is, how many more minutes does he get? Well, you have to think he's going to push 30 as that starting power forward. The other options they have there is TJ Warren going to shift up and play the 4. Are they going to get TJ Leaf in that role as well? So you think he's going to push up to 30. Will that mean that we get 18 points a game from Domantas Sabonis? I think there is a possibility that he could get to that level, but it's going to be the efficiency, which is where we have to have that question mark on him, because he did take such a huge leap up from 51 to 59% coming in as a center. Now, if he's playing further away from the basket, and to be fair, him and Miles Turner together, you'd probably put Sabonis closer to the basket and put Turner out further because he's the guy that can actually shoot as opposed to Domantas. So maybe that doesn't have too much of an impact there. But now he also moves into the starting lineup where maybe he has a bit of a ding in his overall usage. As a starter last year, he started only 5 games. He averaged 18 and 11.5 in 32 minutes. Really, really good. But the usage went from 24 down to 21. So I think that's the concern we have to have there, is will that usage drop off? Now, it's still going to make him a better player than last season, because going from 25 to 30 minutes is key. He offers nothing defensively. The passing, maybe he's going to have to do some of that with no real, huge assist guy on this team. As I said, Brogdon is not a huge assist guy, and he's their point guard, so maybe he helps there. It's just going to be, I think, almost a definite increase in what Sabonis can do this season. If he gets to 20 points per game, I'd be a little surprised, but it's not not completely crazy to think that. I'm going down here in terms of how these guys were ranked last season, so you'll see some names who probably aren't going to be in that mix moving forward. But before we get into talk about the next group of guys, I just got to remind you guys, check out Locked On NFL. NFL preseason is here, and Locked On NFL in its new format, it's on fire. Expert analysis of the former NFL scout Matt Williamson, also now hosted by Brian Peacock. Locked On NFL is your daily national podcast on all things NFL with Matt's unique take on the game. Follow Locked On NFL now on your favorite podcast provider. The guy we're talking about now is Chris Dunn, who was the 86th ranked player per game last season, and he's not going to get to that. He played 30 minutes a night. He's got Tomas Satoransky, Kobe White, Ryan Archer-Jacquino, Big Shaq Harrison.
Big Shaq.
All those guys there. Now, you could say he's better than Arch. You could say he's better than Big Shaq. I'm not sure that's actually accurate. I'm bloody confident that Satoransky's better. Plus, they're going to want to get minutes to Kobe White. So I don't think we look at Chris Dunn as a fourth-year breakout, and that's all I have to say on that matter. Another guy who's going to not go with the trend of breaking out is the artist formerly known as Torian Prince. He was a real disappointment last season, 117th ranked player overall. Injuries did hurt, there's no doubt about that. Only 55 games and only played 28 minutes. We thought, he's going to have to get a ton of minutes at small forward, 33, 34 a night, but he only played 28. The assist rate went down, his passing dropped off considerably, and it was a real disappointing season. And now he heads to Brooklyn. Yes, there's no Kevin Durant, but I think Rowdy Rodion's Cool Rooks will be the starter at power forward, with Karis LeVert and Smokin' Joe Harris as the 2 and the 3. Leaving Prince to get back up 3 minutes and back up 4 minutes, mid-20s again in minutes, and not really going to be worth it as a standard league guy. I still have some belief in Prince, but it was pretty consistently eroded last season. The next guy is real interesting, and this is where I think he's going to blow up, and that is big Fred VanVleet of the Toronto Raptors. Dan Green is gone. The fun guy, Kawhi Leonard, he has gone. The board man has got paid, so someone has to step up. Now, will it be VanVleet that starts? Will it be Norm Powell that starts? I don't actually give a shit which one it is, because VanVleet's going to get the most minutes. He was a guy that when I did some dynasty projections last season, his numbers came out, I said Fred VanVleet here could potentially be a top 25 guy in the next 7 seasons. I went, that sounds crazy. That's weird. The other guys who came out in that list, I think one of them was Siakam as well, actually came out pretty high. And Tom Bryant. So they all hit. They didn't all hit, but a lot of them did. And this is an opportunity here for Freddie. In the last 13 games of last season, not including the playoffs, 30 minutes a game, and he was the 85th best player, averaging 12.5 points on just 18% usage. I'd expect that usage to go up pretty considerably this season. I think that he's got even more room to get better after this year. Now, he is going to be a free agent after this season, but there's a chance Kyle Lowry's gone. I think we see Fred VanVleet potentially pushing into a top 50 player. This season, I'm not sure. Next season, if he stayed in Toronto, I'd feel pretty confident that he would be able to get to that level. Really, really strong stuff from VanVleet. He can shoot, he can score, he can get assists, he can play defense as well. There's really a lot to like here with Fred, who last season was his worst steal rate year, 1.2 per 36, but prior to that, he'd been at 1.6 and 2 steals per 36 minutes. So some real ability for VanVleet, a larger role. He is absolutely a top 100 guy for this coming season and could get better. Brandon Ingram, 160th ranked player last season. New environment, obviously, with him over with the Pelicans, coming over from the Lakers. Has never had a top 100 fantasy season. His 17-18 year was the closest, where he's 112th. And in large part, the poor free throws are a real reason behind that. The complete lack of steals and blocks is also big negatives there. The thing I think we can see with Ingram is he only averaged 3 assists per game last season. Now, this is a different situation in the Pelicans. A lot of ball handlers there still with Lonzo Ball and Drew Holiday. But Ingram, I think, can push to 4.5 assists maybe this year as a wing initiator. Can that shooting from the line, especially with how many attempts he takes, that is a real problem. And he's not quite in punt territory, but he's not far away from it. And can he hit threes? And can he take threes? That's the problem. 1.8 3 attempts last season is piss poor. And 1.8 the year before that, also piss poor. And in one season he shot well, one season he shot poorly. He just doesn't take them. So he's got to be able to provide. In fact, the only two categories he was a positive value in last season were points, where he had 18 a game, and field goal percentage, where he's at 49.7, which is a nice number. But the volume just isn't there for most of the time to him really to be a contributor there. Now, will he be a guy that can take a step forward? Oh, I do think that he can. I just don't ever think he's going to take enough three-pointers regularly or be a good enough free throw shooter. This is just who he is, and I think that's always going to hold him back. But I think we expect him to get a bit of a rise in the assist rate for this coming season, but that complete lack of defense, the completely poor free throw shooting, I think could hold him back. But we'll see how his new environment goes. I think a lot of people will be surprised to see Caris LeVert as only the 162nd ranked player last year. At the start of the year, he was looking like a top 70, top 80 player minimum, and then he fractured his ankle and came back and wasn't the same. But in the playoffs, he started to look good. Now, they did bring in Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. Of course, Durant's not going to play this season, so Kyrie basically comes in and replaces D'Angelo Russell. So LeVert, I think, is going to have to step back up and put up some big numbers, much like he was doing at the beginning of last season. In the playoffs, he averaged 21 points in the 5 games in 29 minutes, 3 assists, 4.6 rebounds, got a steal, and shot the ball well, including 46% from 3. It's a real big positive for LeVert in terms of making that comeback, and I think that he at that 162 rank from last season is going to absolutely obliterate that as he takes a step forward and plays career high in minutes, a career high in scoring. We've got to get the efficiency up. His free throw shooting has gotten worse all of his 3 seasons, which is a concern, as has his field goal percentage, and he had a career low in 3-point percentage. So there are definite concerns there with the poor shooting numbers from LeVert, but assists, steals, threes, scoring in minutes, I think they all go up. I think he's got a real chance to go back and crack that top 100. Again, I'm talking about guys here just going down the ranks from last season. DeAndre Bembry, actually the 170th ranked player. I don't think, if you would ask anybody, was DeAndre Bembry and Caris LeVert in the same sphere for fantasy last season, people would have said, get your hand out of your ass, that's wrong. And if you also said that DeAndre Bembry was ranked higher than Jaylen Brown, they'd also think you were crazy, but that's exactly what happened. Bembry this season, I don't see where the role is for him in Atlanta, so a big fourth-year breakout, not really happening, but he played all 82 games for the first time in his career. He can get assists, he can get steals. I'm just not sure that he pushes into a big role. Now, the other guy that I'm going to talk about now, I just mentioned him, Jaylen Brown, 179th last season. Much like Brandon Ingram, much like Kyle Kuzma, players who get a lot of hype. They're not good fantasy players, and Jaylen never has been. Again, his best season was 138th in the 17-18 season. Now, he saw his minutes fall by 4 per game last season. How are the Celtics going to run things? They had big losses. Al Horford is gone. We know that. Kyrie Irving is gone. But Kemba Walker comes in. He takes all Kyrie's minutes. Rozier is gone, so that means Marcus Smart plays more at the 1 than the 2. So Jaylen, if he starts or not, we don't know. I think we see the minutes jump back up from 26, but that doesn't mean he's going to be good. Absolutely putrid assists, steals, and block numbers from Brown, much like Ingram, a piss-poor free throw percentage, and the field goal percentage has never actually been a positive for him either. So there are a lot of concerns with his fantasy game. Give him the extra minutes, take a flyer on him with a last pick. Maybe this is it. Maybe he is the guy that where you look at and go, well, the first 3 years, there's a lot of consistency and a lot of consistently bad type of fantasy numbers, but maybe this is the year that it turns around. Maybe he learns how to pass. Maybe he generates defensive stats. I'll say he doesn't, but there is that possibility there with him. If we go through some other fourth-year guys who are worth mentioning here, I'll just run off some names. Bryn Forbes, Ivica Zubac. I don't see much with those guys' roles changing. In fact, I think Forbes' role actually might decrease this season. Malik Beasley played 23 minutes a night for the Nuggets, but I don't think we're going to have Gary Harris. Nice, Gary! Or Farton Will Barton miss nearly the whole season, which is what happened last year, which could impact Beasley, and he is just a guy that scores and does absolutely nothing else. Shout out to Jaylen Brown. Daniel House, Ryan Archer-Jacquino, Dorian Finney-Smith. Now, House, the 200th ranked player last season, I think he's going to be the starting small forward for Houston. He played 25 minutes a night. I'd expect a couple of extra ones there. And he was really, really efficient with his shooting. So that he provides nice 3-point value on efficient shooting. So maybe there's some value there for deeper leagues. Damo Jones, I don't think he's going to play much this season. Jakob Poeltl, that's going to really depend on how Popovich wants to run things. Now, the second half of last season, we saw the minutes start to rise as they played more Poeltl and Aldridge lineups. And he played only 17 minutes a game over the course of the season. But efficiency from the field, decent block numbers, solid rebounds. He can be a very low upside back-end center, but probably more 14 to 16 team leaguers. Jake Layman, Czech Diallo, Ante Zizic, Yogi Ferrell, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, none of these guys should be getting you excited. Furkan Korkmaz, the 337th ranked player a couple of years ago, last season, back in Philadelphia, they need him to be able to shoot. He could be a deeper league 3-point streamer. At least he's someone to pay some attention to. Not someone to rely upon, of course, but at least someone that you might be able to get in there, much like Landry Shamet was for that team last season before he went to the Clippers. There's some interesting stuff with him if he can develop that 3-point shot, which he hasn't yet. He has a history of it in Europe, but not in the NBA. So we're still a little bit off that. Derrick Jones Jr. is someone who people get really excited about in Miami. I think he's an every night rotation player here. But when we look at the Miami Heat rotation, all right, so what the appeal in in Jones is defensive stats. 0.8 steals and 0.7 blocks in only 19 minutes. On a per 36 basis, 1.4 and 1.3 is really good. Took his shooting up from 40% to 49%. Still a terrible free throw shooter and not a good 3-point shooter. So I worry that 2-point number might be a little bit inflated. That's the concern with him. Can't pass, not a good rebounder. But where's the role? Goran Dragic is the starting point guard. Dion Waiters could be the starting shooting guard. We don't know yet. Or they put Jimmy Butler in that position. So if they go Waiters and Butler, that means Justice Winslow is going to be on the bench getting backup minutes. Kelly Olynyk, although he did just hurt his knee today playing for Team Canada, we don't know what the severity of that injury is. He's a starting power forward and Bam Adebayo at center. So where does Jones fit in there? One of those guys, either it's Waiters or Winslow, is going to come off the bench. You've got Tyler Hero in the mix there as well as your 6th and 7th man. So does Jones come in as the 8th man, the 9th man? James Johnson also still around for this Miami team. Where is he fitting into the rotation? Now, Jones has shown some positive signs, no doubt about that, but I'm not sure that he is really ready for a consistent big minute role, and will those defensive stats be able to continue if that big minute role comes? He seems to be a bit away from that, so to me, he's not really on the 12 or even 14 team league radar just at this point. I think they're probably the major guys that we need to talk about in terms of fourth-year players in the NBA. Dragan Bender in Milwaukee, I don't think he's going to be an every-night player. Patrick Macaw in Toronto, there's definitely an opportunity there with Green and Kawhi leaving. I'm not sure that Macaw is going to get first crack at that. Layman in Minnesota, again, Okogie, Culver, Wiggins, those guys are all probably ahead of Jakey Layman just at this point. But there's some clear opportunities here. Siakam's got a big opportunity. Brogdon and Sabonis in Indiana. VanVleet and LeVert. Jaylen Brown and Ingram are going to have those chances to step forward as well. And Dejounte Murray, of course, and Dario Saric in some different roles heading into this season. So that covers a lot of these guys heading into their fourth seasons. Make sure you are following me on Twitter at @redrock_bball and check out Locked On NBA on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On NBA Net. Also, I'm on Instagram, Locked On Fantasy Basketball over there. Subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all that stuff. And on YouTube, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, tell your friends, interact with me in all those social areas. It does mean a lot, and it does help this show grow, and the more this show grows, the better it can become. I think everyone's self-aware of that. On Patreon, go to patreon.com/redrock_bball for positions in the Red Rock Challenge Leagues. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Tyler Hero.